let's look at where we're at. We're going to be moving into the general engagement phase, which means we go back to having these counters that have command points, and it's going to become very important very quickly, I think. We also return to the discipline of the clock, and that's going to make it hard too. And finally, we have to sort through some rules that we've never played with before. So all of these things are going to factor into making this first turn probably a bit of a slog. Okay, let's go back to the rules here. Turn sequence. Each turn, expend one counter, called the regular counter, and one or two reserve counters, if desirable. Pay forfeitures. And if they're due, pay up to half. So we already moved the forfeitures up here for the Confederates. Their counter now, they have 3 from the Union, so that's going to make them a counter of 53. Now, make arbitrary captures. These are the captures that don't require the expenditures of any points. In this case, there are no captures pending that are free. Expend the remaining points of regular counter making moves and counter moves. So let's look at captures real quick. I think we've got a section here on captures. Interesting. Resolving combat captures are not compulsory. Piece that renders another hors de combat may not move again during the same turn. This should be denoted somehow on the board. Oh, so we're going to need some markers. Piece cannot affect more than one capture during a turn. Deployed pieces have no offensive power. We're not stacking any units, so that's not a problem. Captures are always in order during continuous turn. We have no idea what that means. A player should usually open the turn of captures to save points. Yeah. Infantry renders them by displacing, moving to and ousting the hospital piece. If they're in adjacent squares with the bayonet, if in far squares with direct fire. Now this displacement actually costs 5 points to accomplish. The other thing that we have to consider is all this neutralization and preponderance stuff. If at the opening of a turn, 2 infantry pieces are free, in other words, not otherwise engaged, and the enemy is in a square subject to their crossfire, they may render the enemy hors de combat without either friendly piece having to move to displace it. Such captures do not incapacitate either of the friendly pieces. Surrounded infantry, surrounded effect, cavalry. I should have read this over by myself. Cavalry acts by shock, and so they basically just displace. And we've talked about their move, but their combat move to displace is actually a 1 on the diagonal, and then up, down, or left or right. Surrounding cavalry. Artillery piece. Does not command the squares adjacent to it, or those directly the flanks. Right, we've seen this. Artillery duel. Ranged must attempt to overwhelm it with preponderance of fire. Other artillery pieces must be brought up. As long as the pieces are in equal number, they simply neutralize each other's fire. When neutralized, neither side may use fire against any other piece on the board. As soon as either side scores preponderance, the silenced enemy batteries must retire. The enemy battery does not retire as put hors de combat on the next turn, if the opponent so desires, or else it must be reinforced, and so on. Surrounded artillery, and then neutralization and preponderance. Okay, well, this is quite a lot to take in. Examples. Right, that's right. If you move in, yeah, I think the best thing we can do is just try one move at a time. Let's give it a try. Let's give it a try here. Okay, starting turn 35 with the Confederates. And that's what they're going to do. 1, 2, 3, 4 to the side. This can be our marker to denote that this is a line of entrenchments that the enemy is going to have to deal with. Okay, so that was 4 points, taking them down to 49. Artillery versus artillery. This artillery is not in range right now, or is it? It is in range. So this artillery is in range, and that artillery is neutralized. because they are firing at each other. So that is a good thing. Got little toothpicks I'm using to denote this. Any other moves back here that I want to make? No. I do have to deal with this river crossing. So what about this battery? This battery versus that battery. Again, this is within 3 inches, right? Yes. So that battery is likewise neutralized. There's no ability to gain a preponderance because a preponderance would mean I had 2 artillery batteries over here that were both in range and overwhelmed that guy's ability to respond, are neutralized. Now what about the infantry? Infantry, I think, is the same circumstance here. We've got basically dismounted infantry, two half regiments here. In other words, this a regiment, right? Yeah. 3 of them are brigades. The brigades make divisions. Yes. Regiment. 2 half regiments. In other words, 2 battalions making a regiment. Yeah, anyway, the short answer is this is 2 likewise sets of neutralization that they're facing each other. So at this point, there's no ability for them to drive off one another by fire at this river crossing. We'll come back to this while we think on this. Similar circumstance here, except for these batteries are on opposite sides. So the battery can lend fire to, each battery is going to be able to fire at the half regiment on their side. So first let's handle the neutralizations. The 2 infantry units, so this half of both of those units is a half regiment, this half is a half regiment. That infantry fire is neutralized. They're within 2 inches of each other. It's completely neutralized. Now the cannon, on the other hand, is not neutralized. And cannon destroys a half regiment under these rules. So, okay, I am looking at this wrong. These are actually half regiments. I keep getting messed up on the scale because they're bigger than they ought to be. So, first of all, we're taking those toothpicks off the map, putting them back in the toothpick pile. Okay, so the neutralization is this half regiment versus that half regiment, this half regiment versus that half regiment, these batteries versus these. Okay, so this battery can fire upon him and remove him, and as a matter of fact, this removal will free this guy up on the Confederate portion of the turn. Now, this artillery piece cannot affect a second capture. There's only one rare exception when artillery or field fortification can affect a second capture. And this is not it, my friends. So this neutralization will actually be lifted, which means that these guys can potentially fire on those guys if they were in range, which I don't think they are. They're not really in range if we measured center to center. And there's nothing else in range. Okay, so he's not neutralized. He fired, and we won't be firing again. This cannon will have the ability to fire because he can fire on the Union side of the turn. Let's handle the Union later. Is there anything else down here that I can do? Oh yeah, that affecting that capture, because it's considered a capture to destroy a unit. Capture after movement begins is 20 points. So let's walk through this. We spent 4 to move these engineers, and so we're subtracting 20 points now because of that capture. That leaves me with 29 points left on the Confederate side. Neutralize, neutralize, neutralize. So the only way I can break this up is if I would have had infantry over here. Yeah, I can't do that. But this guy is now free. Do I have any other moves that I want to make? I do not. I do not. Okay, in that case, I'm going to wrap up the Confederate turn with a massive 29-point IOU to the Union.